right. Hello, this is Andrew, also known as the Lone Sentry. Andrew, I've got a few questions for you today. First, what is your favorite world to travel to?
Actually, before we start, do you want me to look at the camera or look at you?
Look at the camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, what is your favorite world?
Without a doubt, Lord of the Rings.
Okay, why?
You have no idea how satisfying it is to kill orcs. And it's completely morally excusable, You can just slay them, and there's no guilt. You don't lose sleep over it, and it's a great experience.
That's true.
I'd recommend it to everyone, heartily.
Though all cards on the table, I do know how satisfying it is to kill an orc. Okay, very good. How did you react when you first learned about traveling and that it was real?
Oh, I was so calm. I just, I went in there and I took it in stride. I'd already been suspecting that it was a thing. Stop laughing. It was...
Yeah, totally.
I wasn't surprised at all. No shock whatsoever.
I don't know what chapter I'm putting this on.
Yeah.
Okay.
What color is your toothbrush?
It's white. It's Philips Sonicare. It's better than yours.
It's a good toothbrush.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, last question. You've got the world here as your audience. They're finding out about your friend's story. What would you like to tell them?
Holding a lightsaber is more satisfying than you can possibly imagine.
Good ending words. Well, thank you, Andrew. Glad you got to meet our audience.
Goodbye, Earthlings.
Took you long enough.
Yeah, good thing you chose an easy spot. As I listened to Andrew's talking, he explained that he'd gone to my parents' house and they'd said that I wasn't home and they weren't sure where I was. And it was not the first time that it happened, apparently. And and I said, "You really think that I left for another world?" And he said, "I didn't think so at first, but now I'm absolutely sure. Scar's lightsaber, your sword, there is no way you're not on another world right now." And what? I had no idea what to say, and I needed to focus on training the Seerguard and getting their abilities and watching them work. But this was also important. And I hadn't been giving Andrew the attention he deserves. I sighed, and I said, "Listen, all right, we'll talk about this later, all right, and I will explain what's going on." And he said, "No, I'm not going to listen to any more excuses from you," and he hung up. And I said, "All right, fine." I put the mobile back in my scabbard and pulled out a piece of glass. And I thought, am I really doing this? Yes, I was. I focused on it, and the world around me converged into light and expanded back out into my room, settling back into normal colors. And I stepped out of my bedroom, ran down the stairs, gave a hi to my mom and dad as I passed, and went out the front yard and called after Andrew. And he stopped. He had started going down the street and turned back around, confusion on his face. I came out to meet him, closing the door after me. And I said, I thought your parents said you weren't home. I said, no, I wasn't. That's just where I came through. And he didn't seem to understand that. And then he very much seemed to understand it and didn't seem to believe it. And I said, why is this so hard for you to understand? You're the one who convinced yourself I was on another world so far, is it? Are you surprised now to hear that I actually was? And he wasn't entirely sure what he was hearing. And I was like, look, I can try to explain it to you, or I can just take you. I'm done with this. And I grabbed his hand and took him to Saramea. And slipping the piece of glass back into my scabbard alongside Talonthorn, I spared him a glance as his eyes bugged out and he stopped breathing. And I let him alone for a minute. I knew it would take him a minute to register the situation as I surveyed the teams and their work. The first team had gotten to work. They'd made a plan and delegated, and the stronger ones were grabbing big pieces of stone to put into a sturdy base that the quieter ones were fitting more into place, and they were building up a sturdy pyramid-type tower. And they weren't moving fast, though theirs was definitely going to be the most stable of the three. The second group had just started piling as much together as they could and throwing things into a pile. And it made a lot bigger difference at the beginning, though. It was starting to slow down now that we'd been going for a little bit. And as I sired, I could hear their conversation, that they were deciding who would go run to find the biggest pole that they could to shove on the top to add a whole ton of height at the very end. And I realized, oh, that's not a bad way to do it. And I focused on the third team, which was down one. They only had 4 workers. And they were piling things as well, kind of sloping, trying to just work on 2 sides and get it as high as they could. Though they weren't. They were making good progress, though not nearly as fast as the others were. I'd hoped that they'd be a little bit more desperate to think of good ideas, being one person down. And I looked at Firendo, the blue-skinned youth from before. I'd been wanting to talk with him a little bit later, but destiny kind of urged me to talk to him now, so I started to walk over when I heard a cry and turned to the side to where Andrew stood, kneeling on the ground, still flabbergasted but screaming. And some of the others had stopped to look, and I went down to his side and said, Andrew, buddy, you can't do that. Screaming's a little bit weird here. And he finally came to grips with himself. And he said, Reggie, where are we? I said, Saramea. It was called the World of Darkness before I freed it from the alien race that took it over. He said, you alien. That was the coolest sentence I've ever heard. I said, that's okay, you'll hear more, don't worry. And I brought him up to his feet. I said, I've got to talk to somebody right now. And he finally managed to follow after me as I came to the third team. And I said, Friendo, I need to talk with you for a minute. And he turned and the team looked at each other. One of them looked super frustrated that I was taking Friendo from their team when they were already one down. The other two just kind of seemed in despair. And Friendo seemed worried, and he said, I'll be back as soon as I can. I'll be back as soon as I can, guys. Sorry. Kiriste. And he came over and he said, gee, what do you need? And Um, and I led him away from the group to kind of talk with him alone, overhearing Andrew in my ear saying, "How did you learn alien languages?" And I realized he couldn't understand what I was saying because I was speaking Saramayan. And I reached in my scabbard, pulled out my mobile, and handed him the earbuds as I continued to talk to Firendo. And I asked him how he felt like his team was doing so far, and he said, "Well, really suffering being one person down, and especially being two people down." And he looked back to the other three who were conversing kind of desperately, though too far away to hear from here. And I said, "Yeah, I do feel a little bit bad putting you in that position, but there's a reason for what I'm doing." And I said, "How do you feel like you've been doing with Destiny and being able to access Destiny?" And I said, I definitely feel something, but I don't know that I have it yet." And he looked back to his group. He was obviously worried about them and watched as they abandoned their project and ran off together away. And he looked worriedly and knew he was not going to win this thing anymore. And I said, "Where are they going? What does Destiny tell you about their plans?" And he frowned, realizing that he could know about that, like find out about that. And he closed his eyes, and I felt into his mind. It was hard siring when someone else was siring, but I was trying to find a good way to hear enough from, like, to sense what they were doing with siring, without siring hard myself. And I was able to feel his mind, and I could tell that he was getting there and he was close. And a few streaks of light began to beam from his persona as he frowned. He said, "The palace? Are they going to the palace?" And as he thought about the team again, his mind got off track and he lost it. And I nodded and said, "Yeah, that's exactly where they're headed." And he said, "Why are they going there?" And I said, "I guess you'll have to find out for yourself." I said, "But there's something I need to talk to you about. As I've watched the Seerguard work and everybody advance, you've been the one to make the most progress. And Fiorendo, I want you to be the leader of the Seerguard." And his eyes widened at that. His face grew a little bit lighter shade of blue. And he said, "Gee, I can't do that. You're the only one qualified to lead the Seerguard." I said, "At the moment that may be true, but my hope is that each of you will become leaders of some kind. And I want you all to be able to do the things that I can do. As soon as you have access to Destiny, he will be able to lead you to do whatever you need." And he seemed to feel a little bit more okay with that, but not much. And the whole time, Andrew was watching and just super excited to be part of anything that was going on here. And I said, I want you to be aware of that I'm going to be working towards that. And I want you to be focusing as hard as you can right now on gaining access to Destiny and getting good. Like, being able to work with him. And Fiorendo nodded. And I said, "Feel free to join your team." And I turned to Andrew. I said, "You want to join him?" And Andrew said, "I Like, I like adventure, but like alien adventure, I don't know. I said, you're fine. Everyone here is subjects of my empire. They'll take good care of you. They'll be happy to see an Earth friend of G's. And he said, it's all right? And I said, yeah, go for it. And he was like, sweet. And I said, that's the best way to see my empire anyway. He thought that was the coolest thing, as he ran off with Fiorendo. And thought, all right, well, they're doing well. And we were about halfway through, so not a lot of time left, but the team had headed to the palace to start building at the top, and they'd already be building at a much higher altitude than anyone else had started at, so they still had good chances. And I surveyed the other teams for a little bit longer before pulling up Scar's contact on the mobile. And when she picked up, she swore, and I thought, oh boy, sounds like Scar's training is not going quite as well. I kind of worried a little bit for the travelers that were learning under her, though she taught me traveling, so they couldn't do too poorly. And I said, how's training going? And she said, Tech is an idiot. I told him to look where he's going when he's traveling, and guess, and like some other travelers we know, he didn't do that. And guess where he traveled to? And I said, let me guess, somewhere green. And she said something about deity having a vile sense of humor. And I said, well, how is the search for Skynor going? And she seemed to calm down a little bit. She said, we're still looking, haven't found anything that quite fits the description, but we'll definitely let you know. I'm thinking I might leave them with some gates to be around after they leave so that they can get more exposure. I said, that's a good idea. You're doing well, Scar. Good luck. Keep it up. She muttered her response and hung up. And I looked back over the teams, though something felt wrong. And as I looked at the workers, they could sense it too. Some of them had stopped and they weren't entirely sure why. And as I felt out for destiny, I knew that there was a reason that I felt like I needed to call Scar at that moment. And she called back immediately and said, G, the gate, we found it. There's a people that's being attacked by Profithians right now, and Destiny told me it's them. And I said, get 3 travelers, bring the stone, or bring the gate, and get back here as soon as you can. And I hung up and gathered the people as soon as I could. The 3rd team wouldn't be able to make it back in time, but we just had to go. I gathered them, and I said, there's a group of seers that is being attacked by the Profithians right now, and we need to stop them. I reached into my scabbard and held out a wood chip in the air. And I said, we need to get together, and we need to get them out, evacuate them, bring them to Saramea. They're just like you and being attacked by the Profithians. I know we don't have a lot of training. We're going to keep you away from the front lines. Stay away from each other. Keep your distance and try to feel Destiny. If you are in danger, he will...